comrades are aware, this is the discussion where we'll be talking about the Constitution. And this discussion in point of age really it's the start of us preparing socialist students for the big battles that we think are coming to rise to the challenge of the youth movements that we're predicting and that we want to be a part of, and the class battles that is coming this period. So we will be discussing the Constitution and amendments that are being proposed to that. But I also think it would be good if comrades could come in and discuss the campaigns that they've been doing in individual societies and how comrades have been building their societies and how we can continue to do so. So in a moment I'll bring Adam in to lead off the discussion, and then I'll do a 5-minute break to allow comrades to pop their names down on a speaking slate. I'll allow comrades to come in before then Adam and finally voting to pass the draft constitution. So without further ado, Adam, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Isis, and thank you, comrades. To start, our national conference obviously is always a key fixture in the calendar of socialist students. It's a chance for societies to take a step back from all the important work that we're doing on our different campuses and to be part of a day of discussion and debate on the next steps for our organisation in the year ahead. And already today we've discussed crucial political questions for our work as socialists and young people in Britain. Can capitalism deliver a way out of insecurity for young people? What would a socialist plan for our futures look like, and how can we fight for that? Why is reform currently gaining in the polls, and how can they be stopped through the building of a mass socialist political alternative? Are the Greens the alternative that we need to reform Labour and all the establishment parties? Why do we say that the organised working class needs to be central to any party seeking to challenge capitalism? Is Trump dragging the world into World War III? How far can he and the capitalist class go in the face of mass working class and youth opposition that sprung up from Minneapolis to New York and across the US? Those are just some of the many questions being thrown up in the minds of young people in Britain who increasingly are being confronted by the failure of capitalism to give billions of people around the world anything but falling living standards, war, climate destruction and instability in every aspect of our lives, and who are therefore searching for a way out. And of course, one indication of that searching was the over 800,000 people, as has been mentioned, who signed up to get involved in Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn's initiative to launch a new party last summer. And I think it's worth remembering the reverberations that had on campuses. It included the formation of, at that stage, a number of new Your Party societies, some as rebrands of Labour clubs, some as splits away from Labour clubs, some as brand new societies. And also in September, when as usual Socialist Student societies around the country threw ourselves into the freshers period, most areas were leading on a leaflet with the heading, Your Party Announcement, Our Chance for a Party, a Political Voice of Our Own. And we had more sign-ups to get involved with socialist students at that freshers than in any year, since the pandemic. So that does show, at that stage, the great enthusiasm that existed for Your Party, and of course, throws into sharp relief the failure of that objective potential to be reached since then. But among that 800,000, that would have included tens of thousands of young people who consider themselves socialist, communist, Marxist, and so on. Similar points can be made about the growth in the Green Party as well, which, as we agreed in our political statement on Britain this morning, is not a socialist party, but nonetheless will include many young socialists seeing the Greens as the best party for them at this stage out of the options that exist. To go a bit further back, there were 500,000 who signed up to the Enough is Enough campaign, launched by two national trade union leaders, and also Zara Sultana at that stage as a Labour MP, at the height of the 2022-23 strike wave, with many of those young people signing up, hoping that it would become a new party. And of course, going even further back, there were the hundreds of thousands who joined the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, a self-described socialist who increased the Labour vote share by more than any other Labour leader since 1945, standing on an anti-austerity programme that included free education, mass council house building, and massive investment in green energy, to name a few policies. And even in the aftermath of the defeat of Corbyn in 2019, there was a poll of young people that Socialist students used a lot, especially around that time, showing that 2/3 of young people in Britain said that they would like to live under a socialist economic system. So in other words, for a whole period, for a big chunk of the lives of the people assembled in this room, we have seen this significant openness to the idea of a socialist alternative to capitalism, but at the same time, a searching for a means to achieve it among a layer of young people in particular. And really, that situation forms a major part of the backdrop to the discussion that we are having now on the question of adopting a new national constitution for socialist students. Essentially, this is a discussion on how best socialist students can really put ourselves at the heart of the fight for a socialist alternative on campus, to go out and meet these young people and offer them a means to get organised. This is us renewing our efforts to be the organisation nationally, bringing together all students who see the need for a fundamental change in how society is run and who want to get active now in fighting for that alternative. Currently, there are about 40 or so active socialist student societies around the country, many of which are represented in this conference today. And that is not nothing. And in the past year, we've been able to punch well above our weight, I would say. Above all, by building over months for the youth walkouts against Trump's state visit to the UK, which saw hundreds of students protesting against Trump and the rotten system he represents around the country. And in particular, through that campaign, we've begun to establish societies in colleges and sixth forms, helping young people to get organised in conditions that often are more restrictive, a bit more difficult than in universities. Many societies across the UK have led and won important campaigns, as we've already heard about this morning, linking the attacks that students face today to the need for a free and fully funded education system that is free from capitalist profit interests. And while doing all of that, societies have held political discussions which have been attended by at least hundreds, if not thousands, of new students across the UK in the past year, giving socialist answers to the key questions facing young people in Britain internationally. So there is a lot that we can be proud of this year, but this discussion really now is about how we can build on those solid foundations and kick on so that we can build beyond, say, 40 active socialist student societies towards one day having, say, 140 or hopefully even more groups of young people in their school, college or university getting students organised and fight back for a socialist future. And of course, not just holding important political meetings and events, but linking up nationally to the major struggles of young people, which again, as was touched on in the resolutions voted on in this morning's session, could explode over a whole number of issues in this period. So I have said that this discussion on a new national constitution flows partly from what we've already seen in the past period, in terms of this searching, this swirl among young people, in particular for a way out of what capitalism means for our lives today. But even more than that, it is a discussion preparing socialist students to rise to the challenge of leading the new youth movements that are bound to open up in this new era of capitalist decay, which will include within them a layer of young people who could be won to the fight for a fundamental socialist transformation of society and to socialist students. Now, I don't have time to fully develop points here on all of the different fault lines for youth struggle that are developing in Britain today that we have to prepare for. But I would just take the example of the current situation in universities in terms of the deep funding crisis, which is posing an existential threat to some institutions. There are strikes, for example, currently at the University of Essex, that threatens cuts to 400 jobs at its Southend campus, which would mean the closure of that campus and 800 students being told to commute up the road to the Colchester campus, which is all well and good on paper, but in reality, for a campus where over 50% of students are from local, working-class families born and raised in Southend, it would mean hundreds of students being told that they don't have a place at university. And so those job cuts, those losses of courses for students need to be fought in the immediate term through workers on that campus continuing to build a strong local industrial campaign to stop all cuts, including demanding that the Labour government steps in with emergency funding if needed. And of course, as socialist students, we stand in full solidarity with those staff who are taking strike action to save jobs in the future of the Southend campus, and we applaud all of those students who have been mobilising in solidarity with that action, holding solidarity protests, mobilising for the picket lines. At the same time, however, for as long as this Labour government continues down the road of entrenching the unsustainable marketised tuition fee model of higher education, where they ask students each year to pay more and more in tuition fees, then there will likely be more Southends. Already there have been 15,000 threatened job cuts in higher education since the start of 2025. I mean, according to the government themselves, it is not ruled out that some smaller higher education providers with a few thousand students could face a financial collapse this year, and a lot of courses for thousands of students at those institutions. And any campus closure in that fashion could raise the potential for big, localised student movements, which of course socialist students would have to be ready to offer a lead to, including raising the need for students to organise along staff, for example, by occupying campuses, by calling for mass campus assemblies on how to generalise that fight on that campus to other campuses nationally. That could be a potential powerful spark, igniting the anger of students across the country who in their time at universities have only known a cost of living crisis, packed classes, sky-high rents, all the while facing the prospects of never finding a decent job or a decent home, with a lifetime of student debt ahead of them. So if Socialist Students was able to tap into that mood of anger on one campus, then we would be poised as a national organisation with societies across the UK to spread that fight towards a new national movement for free, fully funded education, demanding that the super rich pay for the crisis in education, not students and workers, and raising the need for a socialist society ultimately that is under the democratic control of the working class as the only way to guarantee a high quality education system available to all. So that's just to give one example of a potential flashpoint for youth struggle that is posed this academic year that socialist students need to be preparing for to give it a national expression against this Labour government ruling on behalf of decaying British capitalism. But as we touched on this morning, the general discontent of young people under capitalism today, not just around our crumbling education system, but all aspects of our lives, can lead to powerful movements around all kinds of issues. For example, new anti-war movements, including the resurgence of mass protests and solidarity with the Palestinian people, new youth movements against racism, sexism, LGBTQ+ phobia, and all forms of oppression which the capitalists and their politicians are attempting to stoke up in an attempt to divide potential opposition to their rule and to their system. We can anticipate new movements against climate change and the inability of capitalism to deal with this existential threat. For example, youth climate strikes, that's also posed. We can also anticipate movements against youth unemployment, attacks on young people's access to benefits and so on, which would also find an expression among students who of course are set to graduate into that world of even more insecurity. And so socialist students, we want to be at the head of those movements, pushing them in the direction of the fundamental socialist change that is needed, and to come onto the Constitution, as it says quite early on in the document. Socialist Students aims to relate to wider movements of students and young people by offering a clear socialist way forward, seeking to organise students in support of a commonly understood programme and plan of action for that movement. And really the whole Constitution, as currently drafted, is designed as setting up socialist students to best play that role of being a youth socialist leadership. To give one example, by restructuring our National Steering Committee to include a representative from all active socialist student societies, as well as newly formed societies being able to bring on a representative in between conferences rather than having to wait for the next conference to get a seat at the table. By doing that, we're trying to make sure that every society is as integrated as possible into the national life of socialist students, creating a clear link between the activities of a society on the local level and the overall organisation nationally. That would mean that if a new youth movement does explode in the near future, we can meet as a national body, bringing together the views of as many societies as possible across the country, to then go and hammer out a national plan for how we can intervene into that movement, to give it a socialist expression, and then allowing societies to go away and act on that national plan locally. Of course, that is not the only measure proposed by the draft constitution for how to cohere Socialist Students as a national organisation. For example, the document raises the need for a Socialist Students National Secretary to be elected as a point of contact with societies in between conferences and meetings with the steering committee. And just on that, the steering committee, we moved to accept the majority of the amendments that have been sent in on the constitution, though I understand that comrades will be coming in to speak on different amendments that they have submitted. But in particular, for example, on that point of creating a national link between societies and a national organisation, I'll point to the amendment, for example, from the University of Liverpool Socialist Students to point 5.6 of the Constitution, which is on page 14 of your conference booklets, which makes the point that the National Secretary should aim to maintain regular contact with the steering committee rep from each society. That's a good idea. We move to accept that in the spirit of cohering Socialist Students as a national organisation. At the same time, while changes to how we organise our organisational methods can help to cohere our organisation at a national level, the Constitution also makes clear that the key red thread tying societies of Socialist Students together at all times is our shared determination to fulfil the aims of Socialist Students. In other words, we are in the same organisation because of our shared politics, fundamentally. And if you are a member of Socialist Students, it's because you are someone who agrees with the aims of Socialist Students as laid out in Article 2 of the Constitution. So those aims in Article 2, on the first page of the Constitution, those, if you like, are our red line. If you want to be part of Socialist Students, you have to agree with those broad aims of fighting for socialism, through building support for those ideas on campus with political discussions, through campaigning, through building links between students and the wider workers' movement, and so on. However, when it comes to how those aims can be achieved, the Constitution also seeks to encourage the fullest possible exchange of ideas, both within local societies and within the national organisation as a whole. So, for example, the Constitution makes clear that it's not a condition of membership that you sign up to every single demand that is included in the Socialist Students National Programme, every single demand in the articles that we put on our website, every single political point contained in articles within our magazine. And actually, as a member, you have the fullest rights to argue for changes to that programme within the democratic structures of Socialist Students if you think that those changes would help Socialist Students as an organisation to more effectively fulfil its aims. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of the distinction of those aims and the programme, which is a living, breathing, democratic discussion and debate that we want to take place, a genuine battle of ideas taking place within Socialist Students. And we want that exchange of ideas to happen not because we are a debating club, but because we understand that it's through democratic discussion and debate that different ideas and approaches can be weighed up against one another, put into action as a result of discussion, and then tested out in the real struggle. And if someone's ideas actually prove to not be that effective, then we can go back to the drawing board, have a rethink, and try out a different approach. But that's only possible on the basis of the fullest possible democratic discussion and debate within Socialist Students at all levels. So that's also a key part of this Constitution. And really, it's by taking that open approach that I believe that we can make sure that Socialist Students is a vibrant and democratic umbrella for all students who want to assert the struggle for socialist change on events in the months and years ahead. So that's why the Constitution makes clear that members of Socialist Students may also be members of other political organisations, provided, by the way, that that does not prevent that member from striving to still fulfil the aims of Socialist Students. It's also why the Constitution codifies a way for student societies of other political organisations to affiliate to Socialist Students and to participate in the national structures of Socialist Students. Again, provided that that student society agrees to the constitutional aims of Socialist Students. So in practice, that would allow, for example, a Your Party society, or perhaps a Young Green society, or a currently unaffiliated independent left society or independent socialist society, of which there are many around the country. It would allow those kinds of societies to affiliate to Socialist Students, to have voting rights at Socialist Students National Conference, to have a representative on the Socialist Students National Steering Committee, all while still maintaining its independent identity under the umbrella of Socialist Students nationally. And I believe that that would be a huge plus for Socialist students in terms of bringing together student organisations who might not agree 100% on everything, but who do agree on a shared ambition to fight under this Labour government for socialist change. And that kind of socialist students, if you like, could help to increase the potential for students to be a factor in how struggle develops in this period. And at the same time, it would allow the different trends, Greens, your party, socialists, Marxists, communists, and so on, to discuss and debate what needs to be done now to take forward the struggle for socialism. Again, with those ideas then being tested out in the heat of struggle. So, with this constitution, we would be saying, we invite students who want to fight for socialism to join or set up a Socialist Students Society, which is open to individual students from all political parties or none. However, if currently you are a member of a student society of the Greens, or a Your Party society, or an independent left society, then we aren't saying you have to dissolve your organisation to be part of Socialist Students. However, we are inviting you to coordinate your activity where possible with other Socialist Student societies locally and nationally by affiliating to Socialist Students to increase the potential for students to fight for socialist change. And as an affiliated society, you will be free to put forward the views of your organisation within the national structures of Socialist Students, and even, if you like, to receive a supply of Socialist Students material that we produce nationally to contribute to Socialist Students, publications, and so on. So hopefully that point is made clear enough. But of course, do come into the discussion if you wish for any clarification on those points. At the same time as seeking to relate to those students who are already organised, I do also think it is important that the current constitution sets its sights firmly on welcoming in as well new layers of students who haven't yet seen the need to get organised, but who in the coming period could be one for socialist students, not least through seeing our organisation leading mass campaigns and new youth movements. I wanted to give the example of the youth walkout against Trump campaign that we led back in the autumn. As a result of socialist students leading that campaign, we were able to meet a layer of young people, in particular from colleges and sixth forms, who were taking political action for the first time ever. I mean, as one of the organisers who was on the national anti-Trump demo on the day that he arrived in the UK in September, I can say that many of those school and college students who were behind our banner were taking their first ever political action on that day. So those young people on that day saw socialist students as their organisation. And at least one sixth form in London, we helped students who we had met during the Trump walkout campaign to build their own student collective as the next step out of the Trump protests on September the 17th. So on the basis of our perspectives for future youth movements, I think we have to prepare for more of that in future. But not just with, say, dozens of students seeing socialist students as their organisation, but hundreds or even thousands wanting to become part of socialist students on the basis of our organisation leading youth struggles. And so this constitution on that basis does try to make it as easy as possible for those potential new layers of students to establish themselves as socialist student societies. For example, the reason that the current constitution, as worded, proposes that each society gets exactly one representative on the National Steering Committee is in large part to ensure that any newly established socialist student society actually feels that their voice is going to be heard within the organisation nationally. That simply by virtue of them arriving on the scene later, that their voice still isn't outweighed by, say, another society which might be bigger, but still only has one representative. It's that kind of approach as well that makes sure the discussions that take place between different societies on the National Steering Committee are held on the basis, on the weight of ideas as opposed to the weight of pure numbers. But more generally, I'd say just having a constitution in the format that it currently exists, which clearly defines the aims of socialist students, what it means to be a member, what it means to be a society, the rights of a society, the relation of other societies to other socialist student societies and to the national organisation. A constitution that talks about how socialist students fight to fund itself in order to have the necessary resources for achieving its aims, things like leaflets or magazine, hiring venues for conferences like we have today, producing placards, banners, posters for future protests. Having that codified, if you like, in the constitution that we could give someone, all of that provides, in my opinion, a much firmer basis for winning new groups of students into socialist students in the period ahead. So, I suppose just to make some final remarks now. Even if we did have the best constitution in the world, with the perfect grammar, the perfect proofing, the most conservative use of space, if you like, even if we had the best constitution in the world, that alone would not be enough to build socialist students into the kind of organisation that I have suggested we fight for in this introduction. And myself and the rest of the National Steering Committee, we do hope that this constitution will be voted for as currently amended. And I believe that comrades from the relevant societies will come in again to expand on why they've submitted these different amendments that are in the conference booklet. But either way, whatever comes out of this conference, I think the task of all socialist student societies is clear, in that we need to translate what is currently words on a bit of paper into action. And that starts by thinking through as a society how you are working to fulfil the aims of socialist students on campus, which we are discussing today. Will your society be seriously building for a campus protest, an open meeting around International Women's Day on March the 8th with the 4 weeks that we have remaining? Or will your society be holding a day of action in solidarity with young people in the US fighting back against ICE and Trump's brutal capitalist disorder? What about your society preparing to stand members of your society as socialist anti-cuts candidates, in particular, student wards in the upcoming May elections, standing on a programme of solving the housing crisis, mass council house building, bringing back EMA, funding so that all sixth forms and colleges can have students' union reps, and so on. Will your society be working together with local trade union branches, community campaigns, and other socialist organisations locally to organise a conference for a people's budget, which we invite all council candidates to then stand on in May? On most campuses as it stands, there will be all kinds of possibilities for campaigns against cuts, which we can link transitionally to the fight for free education, and from there a society run on the basis of what we all need, not on the profits of a tiny few. For example, as we're doing currently in London through the campaign against circuit laundry fees, or in York where we've led a campaign against the halving of student bursaries for first-year students, to give a couple of examples. So I would say, whatever your society does out of this conference, let's make a plan for how to take the ideas of socialism out onto campus over the remainder of the academic year. Through a programme of regular meetings, yes, but also through campaigning on the issues affecting students where you are. And really it's going to be by getting into the swing of that kind of work now, making socialist students as far as possible a real factor in campus life and the battles developing on campus, that we can best establish socialist students as the organisation that is prepared to lead young people in the fight for the future that we deserve, and not what this rotten capitalist system says that we can afford. So on that note, I really look forward to the discussion and hearing what role comrades see this constitution as potentially playing for socialist students in the months and years ahead. Thank you.